Flooding in Texas is common, but not like this. How prepared is Texas for Mother Nature's wrath? We explore that with our roundtable, KXAN meteorologist Rosie Newberry and Kia Collier from the Texas Tribune. And the state of protecting children. All signs point to a foster system failing. But what about the people living through it?
Some foster kids are just really angry. They grow up really angry.
The voice state leaders need to hear. It's all today on State of Texas In Depth. Thanks for joining us. I'm Josh Hinkle. Texas leaders faced a pair of big disasters this week. One was deadly flooding, the other problems in the foster care system. We'll take a look at both, but first, the next round of presidential primaries Tuesday. Texas Senator Ted Cruz is one of 3 Republicans still in the race, and right now, he's fighting for votes in states like Pennsylvania and Indiana.
And Indiana's voice, Indiana's megaphone to the country, will decide which path this party goes down, which path this country goes down.
Donald Trump is leading Cruz, but he needs to get at least 54% of the delegates left for the party's nomination. If not, people at the GOP convention this summer, not voters like you and me, could pick who will face Democrats in November. A state lawmaker from Round Rock is the new chairman of the state's watchdog, the Sunset Advisory Commission. Representative Larry Gonzalez steps up just after the panel took a hard look at the Board of Dental Examiners. It found no inspections but plenty of patient deaths under sedation. Sunset will check back for changes in the months to come. This fall, it's on to the medical board and even TxDOT. Lawmakers will also have some tough budget decisions when they return to the Capitol next session. First, the oil boom is shrinking, meaning less money in the bank. Next, the state's facing verdicts in major lawsuits that could spend billions. Then Texas Medicaid bills are piling up. And let's not forget this week's round of severe weather in the state. It will cost a lot, too. It's already adding up, starting with hail earlier this month. Damage that will cost $1.3 billion. That's with a B. And major flooding this week could cost more than $5 billion. That goes for Central Texas, too. Bastrop County is one of a handful now deemed disaster areas. Heavy rains forced water rescues and tore through many homes and businesses. Even worse around Houston, it topped levels we haven't seen since the 1880s. Governor Greg Abbott toured the area. His disaster declaration clears the way for money from Washington, especially important as severe weather season has just begun.
Is very, very important for everybody in whatever community they live in. If you may encounter potential flooding or if you receive any type of warning whatsoever from local law enforcement officials, heed those warnings. The worst of the rainfall is behind us, with the caveat that there will be ongoing rainfall. We need to be vigilant and concerned about ongoing rising water.
Now, more cities hope to tap into a state fund to prevent flood damage and help save water during the drought. That list includes Austin. The city wants to borrow more than $160 million. If the state approves, Austin will buy smart water meters. It will also upgrade reclaimed water systems. Our roundtable knows full well the power of the Texas weather. KXAN First Warning weather meteorologist Rosie Newberry and Kia Collier from our media partner, the Texas Tribune. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So we know flooding pretty well here in Central Texas. Rosie, what is this spring's flooding like compared to the deadly flooding we had in Hays County last May?
Well, it's so difficult, Josh, because I think you look in Austin and there's no comparison. You know, we saw 5.2 inches of rain in one day back when we look at the May floods. So the problem is that people see not big flooding here in Austin, so they think not big flooding happened. However, we saw more than 14 inches of rain in some portions of Fayette County over just the last couple of days. And the craziest part is that a lot of that happened in about 6 hours, which is, as a meteorologist, it's surprising to see such huge numbers. What happened in Hays County around May of last year was still inches upon inches of rain, but you know, it was also multiple days of inches of rain. And so that's when we started to see that huge wall of water come down the Blanco River, and that's how we got into so much trouble. And unfortunately, this is just this area, you know, flash flooding alley. We're going to see something like this again. So if you're in Austin, this time compared to last year, no comparison. It's no big deal what we saw, only nuisance flooding. However, this time last year, when we look at Hays County, it was less of a 6-hour event and more of a multiple day, multiple inch wall of water event.
But we're still a little bit before last year right now. I mean, we're
Yeah.
a month earlier,
Yeah.
and who knows what next month could bring, right?
Well, it is worrying, I'll be honest about that. We're starting to see new outlooks come out saying that we could change from El Nino, which should have been categorically wetter and cooler than average, which is why we saw some of the flooding we did probably. And we're going to be morphing now. It says a pretty good chance into La Nina conditions, which are going to be happening by late summer, early fall. So you know what? That's actually really good news when we start to talk about the potential of flooding moving forward, because it actually should mean drier conditions back here in central Texas. So I am still very tentatively watching how things are going to go down in the next couple of months, because this is where we're going to see the most rain before things really dry out for the summer, right? However, moving forward, I think that we're going to be able to rest for just a couple of months as we transition into this El Nino, or La Nina, pardon me.
That's good, because lawmakers are probably a little concerned with how much this is costing for the state. I mean, we have been talking about the fact that we've got some lawsuits going on. The oil and gas industry isn't doing too great. So when you have disasters like this, that's also strapping us a little bit financially, and we got a budget shortfall, right?
Yeah, we do. I haven't seen damage estimates for this flooding yet. I think it'll be a little while, but they're comparing it to Tropical Storm Allison in 2001, which cost $5 billion. I don't think it'll be quite that much, but the rainfall certainly exceeds the Memorial Day flooding of last year, which also hit Houston. So yeah, we'll see. There's a big price tag for sure.
And what do you think, Governor Abbott really was looking at when he was down there? I mean, what was probably going through his mind?
I think everyone's worried about the budget. There's so many factors kind of looming over the budget next session, and but I think when you're down there touring it, you're probably thinking about the 8 people who died or the loss of life, and the images are just horrific. And as usual, I think flooding in Houston is a common thing. I was a reporter in Houston for about 3 years, and the images are always horrific, but they're kind of nothing new. And I think people in Houston are finally maybe getting a little sick of it and asking, why don't we have better drainage? Why don't we have better, kind of development strategies to require developers to put in, retention ponds or drainage when they pave over a huge swath of land.
Yeah, really, that's one of the biggest issues, because when you've got more and more pavement, there's nowhere for the water to sink into the ground, right?
It is. I don't know if this is true or not, but I mean, I think people in Houston have kind of brushed off the flooding issue as we're a coastal city, we're low-lying, we're flat. In Austin, it's flooding's kind of more novel, because it's like you're not on the coast. But it's certainly getting worse as we see areas that were formerly prairie or undeveloped paved over. It's a huge issue, and I think there's a lot of discussions going on in both Houston and Austin in terms of development and how to do that smartly and to plan for flooding.
When our roundtable returns, getting ready for the next hurricane with the right construction, and keeping young Texans safe, overhauling the state's child protective services, and a look inside foster care through the eyes of one young man. Coming up on State of Texas in Depth. Welcome back to State of Texas in Depth. This week we are taking a look at the big cost of severe weather in Texas. We're back with KXAN First Warning Weather Meteorologist Rosie Newberry and Kia Collier from our media partner, the Texas Tribune. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So we were talking about Houston earlier, and beyond just the flooding that they had this past week, we got another kind of flooding that we all know too well is the hurricane season, and that's something that the Texas Tribune has really been focusing on lately with a special project that you guys launched last month called Hell and High Water. Talk to me about that project.
That's right, yeah. A much different kind of flooding than continuous rainfall that we've been seeing in Houston lately. Our project examined basically the Houston region's extreme vulnerability to storm surge during a direct hit hurricane, which the region hasn't actually experienced in modern times. And storm surge is literally the wall of water that a hurricane pushes in front of it. And our project kind of looked at, it was interactive, and it looked at basically the storm surge that could basically be pushed over Galveston Island into Galveston Bay, and then up both the Houston Ship Channel, which is home to a bunch of refineries, chemical manufacturing facilities, and then also the Clear Lake area, which people might be familiar with. They might be from there. It's a densely populated area. It's also home to NASA, the Johnson Space Center. So NASA is extremely vulnerable, Clear Lake's extremely vulnerable, and there's kind of a debate going on right now about whether to build some kind of barrier along the coast to protect the Houston region from this kind of devastating storm surge.
Yeah, it's like a seawall. I've been seeing that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has been studying this, but it could take 5 years for the study to get done.
Yeah, it's an Army Corps of Engineers study, and there are various plans that have been kind of put out, especially after Hurricane Ike in 2008. That was considered kind of a near-miss storm because it was headed for this worst-case scenario point on the western end of Galveston Island, and then it shifted at the last minute and kind of spared the Houston region from this devastating surge. So after that storm, all these oceanographers and researchers, they were freaked out about it and started looking into, well, what could a storm like that do if Ike had followed its original trajectory? And they've come up with various plans and kind of spent several years fighting over which approach to take. And state lawmakers have said, you guys need to figure it out and then tell us what plan to champion. Congress at the same time is also saying the same thing to the state. It's kind of a lot of finger pointing going on, but I think there are a lot of discussions, and maybe we'll see some things kind of coalescing. The General Land Office, George P. Bush, has formed a partnership with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers.
This coastal barrier concept is one of his big endeavors.
He's made coastal issues or coastal protection a priority, and helped the Corps get funding to do this study. Won't be done for 5 years. Congress has said that's too long. It's been 8-9 years since Ike. We're going to get hit by another storm. But pretty much everyone we talked to for this project said this devastating storm or something close to it is going to have to happen to create the political will to build something like this, which costs billions of dollars. 8 to 10 billion is the kind of price tag that's been thrown out.
Wow. Well, Rosie, you just got back from the National Tropical Weather Conference. Is that what we're seeing? Is that the future?
Well, it's so interesting that you're talking about storm surge. Heard so many experts speak on storm surge. Not only how big of an issue is it going to be for people who have to come in after the storms have passed to assess damage. There's a difference in insurance between wind damage and water damage, and so there are actually meteorologists trained to go out and look at homes to see what has been destroyed. I heard terrible stories about, a wall of water. For example, in Houston, you have all of those industries. Gasoline got into the wall of water that was coming down during a flood, and the gasoline ignited. So you literally have a river of fire floating down. You consider like the Houston Ship Channel. So that is a big discussion. And interestingly, the National Weather Service is going to start putting out a new product where they're assessing storm surge before an event occurs. And I think what's so important is you're talking about a direct hit, which would be just devastating to Houston, especially because it's already so threatened. But, the northeastern side of a hurricane is always going to be the most rain heavy. So you consider even if you got hit by the northeastern side of that storm, we're going to have some major issues. We just heard from folks in the Bahamas. After Hurricane Joaquin, they had storm surge walls, but because they weren't properly researched or properly implemented, they just became huge blocks of concrete slamming into homes. So I think that it's really important, and yes, we are starting to see steps being taken towards getting products that will say, this is what's going to happen. No matter where the storm lands, we can tell you how much storm surge you're going to see, and then more folks talking about, well, what can we do about that once it arrives? Have a bigger wall, have something to help expedite folks leaving their homes, because in most cases an evacuation is going to be necessary.
And obviously a seawall would take a lot of federal funding, as you said. Why has it been so difficult to get Congress to actually get behind this? I know that you guys had a lot of difficulty getting our Texas congressman to actually do an interview about your project.
Right, they wouldn't call us back. According to them, they say this is the state's issue. The state is the people who are impacted. They need to figure it out and give us a plan to champion. And until we have a plan, we can't really do much of anything. There are a few key members kind of in the Houston area who are say that they're talking to the delegation about it and kind of pushing it. But we called, I think there were 38 members in the Texas congressional delegation, including both U.S. senators, and we heard back from 5, I think. We called all of them multiple times, emailed all of them. Heard back from, or were able to schedule interviews with five of them, and others kind of sent statements, but we kind of took that as this is not on your radar and you don't think it's that important. And some of them kind of, fought back after we published a story recently that said they're silent on this issue. But until they start, talking and to media and talking about the issue, we kind of view it as, they're not thinking much about it. And state lawmakers have said, State Senator Larry Taylor from Friendswood has said, the ball is in our court, kind of. It's the legislature, and we've been a little slow on it, but we're working on things now.
Well, what if our Texas Senator Ted Cruz becomes president? He's really got some sway, right?
Maybe, we'll see. I mean, I think there's the kind of looming concern among people pushing for something like the coastal spine to be built that Texas has a history, or Texas politicians do, of not liking to ask for federal money. So yeah, we'll see.
You mentioned, the huge industrial presence that Houston has, and obviously this would have such an economic ripple effect if something like that did happen. This really affects the rest of the state. It's not just down on the coast.
In the country, yeah.
Well, and I'm wondering if either of you think that because you have to see sometimes kind of right in front of you, it has to be an example of we have to see a worst case scenario, because I think, I am champion weather models, but I think so often they just don't have the same amount of impact unless we've had something really horrific happen. So it's sad that in some ways you're waiting for it to happen in order for us to really take advantage of the situation and start bulking up moving forward.
You hear over and over again from state lawmakers and the researchers who are pushing for, a coastal barrier to be built, that this is a national issue, and that's primarily because of the petrochemical, refining complex in Houston. It produces a quarter of the nation's gasoline, 60% of it is jet fuel, an even higher percentage of military jet fuel. Congressman Gene Green told me this story when we were reporting that after Ike, there was a 5-star general who showed up and a Continental Airlines CEO or something to this just little dinky kind of emergency planning meeting, and he was like, "Why are you guys here?" And they were like, "This area produces all of our fuel, and we're concerned, and we want to see what we can do about it." So yeah, it's a huge issue.
And Josh, to take what you're saying just even one step further forward, you're saying the economic ripple is going to be really huge, but let me point out the meteorological ripple. You get a huge hurricane that hits a coastal area, the remnant moisture that we can have sitting from one of those systems, that's one of the reasons why South Carolina saw 27 inches of rain in just one system, and it's from kind of a remnant moisture like this. So even after a hurricane goes by, we could still have the potential days and even up to a week or two later that we could see more economic loss just because the same system hasn't completely exited the area yet. So it can be even bigger by the end of the day.
Yeah, you talk about seeing it firsthand. I really encourage everyone out there to go and check out Kia's project on the Texas Tribune's website, because it just really shows what it would look like. I mean, you take people step by step, what that flooding would look like, and different levels of the hurricane. It's just a really, really cool site. Check it out.
Yeah.
Thank you both for being with us. I appreciate it. Coming up, the state is struggling to find families to foster an overwhelming number of children. You'll hear from one young man who's experienced the ups and the downs of this system right here in the Austin area. Next on State of Texas In Depth. Welcome back. Right now, there are nearly 30,000 children in state care in Texas. Caseworkers are overwhelmed, and they're having a tough time finding good homes for all of those kids. KXAN's Aaron Cargile met with one young man who says he struggled in the foster care system.
I realized a long time ago that the best way to heal from something is to share it.
So Trayvon Harris has been doing a lot of talking. He says the physical abuse started at the age of 5 from 2 stepfathers in a row.
Like all sorts of bad stuff. Even got a mirror cracked on my head, which is why I have this scar. It's like 24 stitches inside and out.
CPS removed Trayvon and his 2 younger siblings from the home when he was 12 after his little sister talked to a school counselor.
We were all separated. We were put into different shelters and treatment centers.
Eventually, Trayvon was given the option to go home, but decided to stay after caseworkers told him the state offers foster children free college. He can't even count the treatment centers and foster homes that followed.
Went up to Del Valley, down to San Antonio, then to Austin, Pflugerville, Lampasas, Manor, and then Austin.
After graduating from Crockett High School, he enrolled in ACC. Trayvon credits a lot of his success to a therapist he met in the system and has always tried to be a light to others in his shoes.
Some foster kids are just really angry. They grow up really angry, feel like betrayed either by their family or really upset at the system because they were taken away.
He believes changes should start with treatment center staff after experiencing more bad than good.
If you're a foster kid and that's all you come into contact with, somebody that doesn't care, why should you?
Trayvon also tells Aaron he's getting help from a group here in Austin called Upbring. They found him a job and an apartment, all while he's still in school. Now he says he'll devote his life to improving the system for others. Coming up, fixing foster care. It's expensive, and lawmakers are promising to step up next session. But how? A final word coming up on State of Texas In Depth. A final word this morning on the state's foster care system. It is broken. A federal judge ruled it is so broken, the state's often taking kids out of bad homes and putting them into worse ones. And right now, we have more children in the system with serious mental and emotional problems. That costs a lot of money. The budget's now $20 million in the red. By the end of next year, that might double. The guy who's heading up the agency all over this mess spelled it out for lawmakers this week. And it was scary. He said too many children are dying even after the state steps in. Those lawmakers promised to help next session. Still, some Republicans with the most sway say more money isn't the answer. The state should just do a better job of spending what it has to fix foster care. Bottom line, the state should do something. That's our show. Thank you for joining us. Remember, you can join us every Sunday morning in the 8:30 half hour. Stay tuned for Meet the Press coming up at 9. I'm Josh Hinkle. Have a great day.